Welcome to the Smith and Rowland Show. Let's join our host, Alan Smith and Jeff Rowland.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Smith and Rowland Show. And boy, I tell you what, we're like every week we're having special guests. And
yes, we are.
I think this is probably one of the most anticipated special guests that we've had.
Without any doubt.
We have the one and only Mr. Stanley Elliott.
That really brings fear upon me.
But yeah, so we got Andy Elliott here with us. He is the owner, guitar builder, luthier at Elliott Guitars. Probably builds more guitars for the worship industry than about anybody out there.
That's right. That's right.
At least some of the best ones, at least.
That's right.
But Andy's here. We're going to be talking about the worship community, about worship in general, where worship is in the church, and we're going to have a lot of good topics here. So make sure you stick around. If you're a new listener here at the Smith and Rowland Show, make sure you go check us out at thekingdompropheticsociety.org.
Find Andy on there.
Andy, you will find him over at ElliottGuitarsNC.com, and his social media links are on there as well. He is a very active social media guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're excited to have Andy here with us. But yeah, Alan and Jeff, you take it away.
Alan, how long have you known Andy?
Since he was 12, 13.
For 30 or 40 years, y'all have known each other.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, longer than 40 years because I'm old now.
That's right.
I mean, older than dirt. I wasn't going to bring it up, but Andy, I mean, good.
You saw me
grief.
get up a while ago.
That was awful. You know, there's a lot of significance to you building guitars, and there's biblical significance to those that built their own instruments. Mm-hmm. And I think that's almost a lost art today, isn't it? I mean, to have Luthers like you out there that's building instruments, especially for worship people. And I wanted you to speak to that for just a minute, if you could, because I know that significance. It carries a spiritual responsibility, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does.
It sure did in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it did.
And,
It really does, even if you aren't doing it for the Lord, it's still spiritual.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think, personally, I think all music is spiritual. I have a really unnatural love for guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had it as far back as I can remember. It was one of the, I mean, I know throughout your life if you're a mechanic, there's some engine or some mechanical thing that fascinates you.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Guitars fascinated me even before I ever held a really good guitar. They were fascinating to me. And, you know, growing up, my dad always listened to, back in the old days, you had back in the days of vinyl, you had a big stereo system in the center of the house.
Right, yeah.
Daddy would come home from work and sit in a rocking chair, and he would listen to country music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And even though it wasn't my favorite kind of music, I was mesmerized.
Yeah.
And I loved it, you know, and I started, even when I didn't understand it, I liked music, and I didn't know how to play, didn't have a clue that I ever could play. Mm-hmm. But I was just always around music. And, you know, back then you used to go to the record stores.
Yeah.
Like we'd go to the beach. There was record stores everywhere. You remember that? Like down on the pavilion.
Right.
And they would just go from record store to record store buying all these records. So music was always there, and I just fell in love with music.
What about that?
And
so it was like God was leading you in that direction of music. He put it in you. He placed it in you.
And I liked all kinds of music because of that. Yeah. I wasn't like stuck on one thing.
So that's intriguing to me. We talked, Alan, what was the podcast we did? Maybe it was an Unplugged. We never quite got there, I don't think, with Don Potter last week being here. But that's always been an intriguing thing to me, is expressions, various expressions in music. Mm-hmm. And because I do believe that God can use any expression that comes out of someone from the sincerity of their heart, you know. And so that intrigues me that you was as good with...
I got it back.
You was as good with country music as you was any other expression.
Just anything. And I remember when I was also real young, my aunt would ask me to, I'm good now, it was my connection here, to go down to the Tabernacle and sit in and play guitar, and it was Southern gospel. Mm-hmm. good learning experience because I couldn't keep up. I mean, there wasn't no way. My aunt can tear an organ up.
Yeah.
My other cousin could tear a piano up
Yeah.
like Jimmy Swaggart. And there wasn't no chance that I was going to keep up, but they would always ask me to go down there and do that. And I loved just the chance to get to play something.
To play some music. What about that?
And so I loved music. And like I said, almost an obsession with it. And I always had a desire to build things and to build guitars, but honestly, I thought there was no way that could ever happen.
Yeah.
You know, and because there's just so much that I didn't know. You know, and
How many years have you been building now, Andy? Since
about 15 years, since
when
2005.
you started, didn't you go up north or something?
Well,
or what was
it? Was
that?
really the Lord was in that. I wanted to go to a Lutheran school because when I looked into building guitars, a lot of the electric guitar schools and stuff, to be honest with you, they were pretty lame. Their concept behind building an electric guitar, it was like, oh, you just build this way and you put these pickups in it if you want to sound like that. That was the extent of tonal research they did. And you study these acoustic builders and archtop builders, like they were so fanatical about how you get this guitar to resonate, how you get this, you build the neck like this type of construction, you do this with the grain and this and that. And I'm like, that's what I want to know. Even though I wasn't going to build those types of guitars, I wanted to take that.
You mean a non-electric guitar, just regular?
I just wanted that knowledge
of the wood
manipulation.
Yeah.
You know, and so I went to acoustic building school and archtop building school, and it was really expensive, and I almost didn't do it. And my wife said, if you're going to do this, you need to go ahead and do it.
Right.
And man, I'm so glad I did, because just right after I got through with the second class is when Peter Stroud got in contact with me.
Oh.
And if I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have been able to build a guitar on the level that
you are
would
today.
have interested him.
Yeah.
So,
You know.
so
What about that?
I'd say probably a lot of people don't know who that is unless you're in the guitar world. But Peter Stroud's one of the probably one of the most admired guitar players
Mr.
in
Tone.
music. Mr. Tone's
Mr.
what they call him.
Yeah.
But he's Sheryl Crow's guitar player. He played for Sarah McLachlan for quite a few
Don
years.
Felder,
Tom
Stevie
Felder, yeah.
Nicks.
Wow.
So he's been around. He's actually
Oh,
a
my
North Carolina
goodness.
guy as well.
Yeah.
Oh, is he really?
Yep.
And he's where now? In Georgia?
Yeah, in Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
Super guy.
Now, you actually build one with his name on it?
Yeah.
Is that right?
We do a signature guitar. He I remember right after when I built him the first guitar, my sister went with me, and Ken Hoover used to own Zion Guitars. He knew Peter. That was my connection to Peter, was through Ken. And on the way down there, I almost just didn't go. I was sick on my stomach. I was like having to stop at every rest area. I was nervous, and I said, well, who do I think I am that I can build a guitar? And I was just scared to death to take him a guitar. And we got there, and him and his wife was just so nice. They were like taking pictures of us.
Really?
Like we were the rock stars.
What about that?
And they just couldn't have been any nicer. And then he turned out he liked the guitar.
Well, that's great.
And he suggested maybe we do a signature guitar. He called me up one day and said, I just want to help you any way I can.
What about that?
Help you build your business. And he's never charged me anything. You couldn't buy what he's done.
Yeah.
Right.
What about
And that's why I know it was the Lord.
that? Yeah. So God opened that door.
Yeah.
And you build guitars for other people in the worship industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, what was the first big worship person you built guitar for? Who was that? I'm trying to remember. I can't remember.
I can't even think of it now.
There's been so many of them.
Actually, Jason, you used to
I used to
help,
work with Andy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Andy.
Jason used to.
Yeah.
Jason helped
Jason
get me into
worked
the
for you?
CNC world.
Yeah.
You've got to be kidding. You actually hung out with Jason?
Well, Jason, he was at the shop a lot.
Yeah.
And that didn't.
Well, that's being nice.
And you mean to tell me that didn't corrupt the shop or nothing? Him being there?
No,
They had a good time.
yeah, we had some life experiences.
Yeah.
We got introduced to them. Me
Yeah.
and Jason went to California the first time. Oh,
The interesting thing about Andy is he made an impression on people no matter where we went. People really knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we would be hanging out with Steve, what was his name? Steven Tyler. And we'd see him. I mean, these are famous people. And they would, know who Andy is. So,
Well, who was you're saying some of the musicians, guitarists that are playing Elliott now? Or that,
Elliott Easton called me up one day. He's the guitar player for the Cars, legendary band. It's just, I need to back up a little bit. I play worship at church, and you did a conference at church one time, and remember Kerry Godwin? I think so. He came to church, and I was a building contractor at the time. I wasn't building guitars, but your son Joe Smith had a 56 Strat that we redid, and Kerry, he's now through the years when I played in the band, everybody had a prophetic word for you, and you get to the point you're like, oh God, here we go again, and that's kind of where I was at. I didn't want to hear it anymore because thank goodness most of them never came true.
I've had some words like that.
And so Kerry walks up there and asks Joe, said, can I play that guitar? And he handed it to him, and he said, who did this for you? And he said, that guy standing right over there. And he walked over to me and said, so you build guitars? And I said, no, I build houses. And he goes, you need to build guitars. And he went on, he come back up a little later, and he gave me this big, long, prophetic word. And I thought, oh, yeah, right.
was it about building guitars?
It was that I was going to build guitars, and that I've got it all wrote down, and that I would be successful, and that I would build guitars for famous people, basically, for regular people and famous people both. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, right, I'm in the middle of the woods in Hiddenite, North Carolina, and no one really knows who I am. And lo and behold, it just avalanched, and
The word actually came true.
yeah,
You don't
to
think
the
it had any-
detail.
You don't think it had anything to do with Owen Smith and Roland show? do you?
It could be.
I
It
think
could
it
have been,
was. I was
Well,
going
I
to
mean-
mention that. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff's been my pastor, Alan's been my teacher.
So, I mean,
So yeah,
Yeah, what can we
there
say?
you go. That's what it is.
But it really
but
did.
you
It
know,
took
of all
off right after
words
that, didn't it?
that I've ever been given, every single aspect of that,
It came
every
true.
little detail,
He just spoke it.
and in order in the way he gave it.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I mean, it was because just the thing like with Peter Stroud, I couldn't have went to Peter and convinced him to
All
do
that, yeah,
and
yeah.
and
How
and
long ago was that you built the guitar for Peter Stroud?
that was in 07.
07.
And I had built a few guitars before that and really got good at building the two Pacific guitars. And then he come along and he wanted something completely different. And I remember it was like a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because, and then that's the number one selling guitar we build still to this day is
Really?
the Peter Stroud.
What
Yeah.
about that? Because of that, since 07, you've been building guitars for other people in the worship industry.
Yeah, it really took off in the worship. And it come along right at the right time when social media was, when I first started, social media really wasn't a thing, was it, Jason? Not really.
No, it wasn't at all.
And it's like about 08, 09, it started, you could actually do videos and put them online and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was
And then-
about 09.
Yeah. And so we kind of hit it right at the right time to be able to do. And Peter, he got an article in Vintage Guitar Magazine, and they did like a full page article, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And on the Tone Master. And
The one you built.
for Peter, yeah.
And who was Peter playing for then?
Cheryl Crow.
Cheryl Crow.
And
okay.
well, he played for mostly Cheryl Crow, but he did a lot of work with Don Henley from the Eagles. He, you know, and Sarah McLachlan and several people, but mainly known for Cheryl Crow. But Peter, he's done a lot of pedal demos and stuff over the years. He's just someone people listen to when it comes to gear.
Yeah.
Carries a weight with him, you know, with that, and so it really helped.
Yeah, well, it validated what you was doing. It gave
well,
you
God,
authority.
that was a God move.
That was the Lord. Yeah, that was the Lord doing
the favor of the Lord,
that, without a doubt. Yeah,
And so it just kind of took off from there. But but really it goes back to, you know, Kerry Godwin. And one day Ricky Skaggs called my shop, and I remember I was standing there looking out the window in the woods, and I'm thinking, I'm talking to Ricky Skaggs. In the middle of midnight in the woods.
and Ricky Skaggs was talking back. Wasn't he? Yeah.
And I'd started doing some repair work for Ricky and stuff like that.
That's great. Through the years that you've been building guitars, I know you've seen, because building a guitar for somebody is a personal thing. It's a lot of it is up to their personality, their feel. Would you agree with that?
No, because we eliminate all that. We build them to our personality, and let people. Yeah, people have a lot of bad ideas. People are really screwed up, and I don't want to put that in the guitar to you, Jason.
Well, let me ask you this:
If you only knew, Jeff.
Yeah,
what have you noticed?
I guess there's something there we don't understand.
They must be. What have you noticed as far as changes in people that you build guitars for since you started to where you are now, especially in the worship?
Well, different generations of people look for different things,
Right.
And like the older generation, like me, playability and tone are real important, and some of the younger kids too. The better you can play, the more those things matter.
Yeah.
The more skilled you are. But then we have customers that aren't very far along in playing, but they just love guitars. They're just, you know, that's their thing, and they'll spend every dime they make on, you know, and that's better than what a lot of people spend their money on.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we just try to approach it as, I want to build a guitar that if you pick it up and go play it, you don't have to get used to it. It feels like an old friend.
That's good.
And it feels like, and that's really difficult to do. And you can't just do anything you want to. You can't just do, in order for that to happen. And I have to go back to Peter on that. Peter told me in the very beginning not to have a lot of strange guitars out there. He said it needs to be a familiar guitar.
Right.
And he said people grew up playing Strats, Tellys, and Les Pauls, and when they pick a guitar up, that's what they're used to feeling, and it needs to feel like something you're familiar with. Because there's a lot of weird, strange, beautifully made modern instruments that just feel awkward.
Don't feel good.
Yeah, they feel you don't know how to strap them on. You don't know how to do
exactly.
this. And Peter's thing was you need to build a very familiar guitar.
Yeah.
But just build it better.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
Well, didn't you get into some situations too with the pickups? I know you had a time that you decided you couldn't find this and you couldn't find that, and you'd finally just
That's been Andy's struggle.
kind of building your own pickups.
He finally just does everything.
Didn't you have a time there that was an issue?
Well, yeah. What you have in the music industry and as a whole, companies that build instruments, not all. Now let me make that very clear, not all. But a lot of them build really good instruments. But when it comes to electric guitars, there again, people think, if you want it to sound like this, put these pickups in it. Well, if the guitar itself doesn't sound good,
the pickups won't fix it?
It might help it a little bit, but it's not going to blow your mind. You know, you've got to have, a guitar has to be alive. It has to have energy. And if the more energy it has, the more a great set of pickups can pick up energy.
Yeah,
and that's tone. If a guitar's made beautifully and really well, but yet it's very sterile sounding. Don't matter what pickups you put in it, it's still going to be sterile. And
So they just pick up what's there.
Yeah.
most guitars are built on a cosmetic basis. In other words, they want it to look a certain way. And when we started doing pickups, when Jason was there, I remember like the Telecaster pickups. Telecasters have always been a love-hate relationship. Down at the first, second, third fret, they sound amazing, but when you play rock and roll on them up high, they're real narky and irritating and thin. And then if you put overwhelmed pickups in them, they sound good for rock and roll, but they don't sound like a Telecaster no more. So we worked for 2 years to come up with a way to make it sound like a Telecaster and feel good playing rock and roll. And Peter Stroud and Dan Bull from 65 Amps worked with me on that for, close to 2 years.
At least 2
we
years.
wound pickups.
Wow.
Till we figured that out. And then we started on the neck pickup. And usually on a Telecaster, the bridge pickup's really powerful and the neck's really weak. And so everybody winds up putting a humbucker or something in the neck and all that. So we tried to make the traditional lipstick pickup work. And it took a lot of time, but see, I can't hire this pickup company over here to work 2 years on a pickup.
Yeah.
They can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
They run a business of winding pickups. They're not going to chase a tone down like that.
I got you. Yeah.
And that's kind of what it's borderline insanity, and I realize that. We try to get a concept of a guitar, not just appearance, from usually it starts with a voice print of what we want this guitar to sound like. Then the cosmetic part comes last.
Yeah.
But in that process, you come across many good things, but it's not what you intended it to be.
Yeah.
And where I think I'm a little bit insane is that's not good enough. It has to be, it has to reach what we originally set out to do, or it's not right.
It's just not right. Yeah.
And that's why I don't make a lot of money, or I don't get to keep a lot of money. But the cool thing is there's a lot of really cool guitars out there now that wasn't out there
That
before.
wasn't out there. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You know, it's been interesting for me to watch Andy over the years. He has this knack he has this very unnatural favor that rests on him when it comes to these guitars and just being around people. I mean, it just like he's not.
'Cause I'm not a nice guy.
Well,
We're just gonna get into that on the next segment.
That's right.
he will take and not understand or know anything about any of what he's getting ready to do, and somehow he figures it out. And not only figures it out, but he becomes a master at it. And that's really, really interesting to watch.
So you ended up then making your own pickups, is that right?
Yeah.
He makes everything,
Pretty
every
much,
single
every
piece.
part
Well,
of it.
for years we didn't make our humbuckers, and when Jason worked there, we were buying these real expensive
Really
humbuckers.
expensive.
Now,
Like,
now you got to tell us what a
a humbucker's a double coil pickup, and I had over the years I had quit playing humbuckers because I just couldn't get the tone out of them like I wanted. And the older I got, I just seemed like I wanted single coil pickups. They were just more energetic, more dynamic, and so we found this friend of ours that made these pickups, and it took 6 months to get a set of pickups,
Yeah.
and they were about $700 for a set.
Wow.
And they were amazing, but it was killing us.
Yeah.
Spending that much money on pickups. Imagine ordering 5 or 6, 7, 8 sets of those and waiting 6 months on them. And Jason got aggravated one day and said, "You're just going to have to figure out how to do a humbucker." And so we started figuring out how to do a humbucker, and man, it turned out it's the most incredible humbucker I've ever heard in my
Go
life.
on about that. Yeah.
Well, let's finish up this segment and let's head on to the next.
Thank you for joining today's Smith & Rowland Show. You can check out our website at kingdompropheticsociety.org and our daily Unplugged podcast at smithandrolandshow.podbean.com. You can also join us on Amazon, Apple, or Spotify.